Grace's fingers tightened around the stack of flyers, like she'd just realized paper could cut. For a full second, the noise of downtown Chicago blurred into a distant hum. Car horns, crosswalk beeps, the slap of shoes on pavement. All of it faded until there was only her stare and my shadow falling across her cheap plastic clipboard. Her eyes flicked over me, fast and frantic, as if she could decode my whole life from the stitching on my coat, the soft wool, the clean lines, the kind of fabric that didn't pill after 3 washes, the kind of fabric you didn't buy when your kitchen ran on coupons and prayers. "Hannah," she whispered. She said it the way people say a ghost's name, like if she said it any louder, I'd become real enough to haunt her. I didn't correct her. I didn't say Grace. I didn't smile. I just stood there, letting the silence do what silence always does. Expose the truth. Grace swallowed hard. Her mouth opened, then closed again, like the words were stuck behind her teeth. She glanced past my shoulder, instinctively searching for someone to rescue her from this moment. Ethan, a Turner parent, anybody. No one came. Of course not. In her chosen world, nobody had time to come running. They were all too busy being tired. She recovered the way she always did. Half a beat later, her expression snapped into something rehearsed, a bright little smile, carefully warm, carefully harmless. The smile of a girl who could hold a knife behind her back and still ask you if you'd eaten. "Wow," she said, forcing a laugh. "You look different." Different. That word carried a whole biography inside it. Different meant I wasn't thin enough to count ribs through my shirt. Different meant my hands weren't raw from detergent and cheap winter gloves. Different meant I had stepped into her nightmare and somehow walked out dressed like her dream. I took the flyer she'd been offering me. My fingers brushed hers. Her skin was warm and damp with sweat. Mine was cool. The flyer was for a tutoring centre hiring student volunteers, the kind of opportunity poor families loved because it sounded noble and paid in nothing but exhaustion. I looked at it like I was reading a confession. "So this is what you chose," I said quietly. Grace's smile stiffened. "I don't know what you mean." I tilted my head. "You knew exactly what you were doing at the orphanage." Her eyes flashed. The velvet cracked for a second and the needle showed through. "And you didn't?" I almost laughed. She really was trying to rewrite the universe out loud. In my last life, I didn't have the luxury of knowing. I was a kid with a form in my hands and hope in my throat. Hope was a leash. It pulled me straight into the Turner house and taught me what it meant to work until your bones felt rented. But this time, I knew. And so did she. Grace leaned closer, lowering her voice like we were sharing a secret between sisters. "You think you won, don't you? You think the Sinclair house is some palace." Her gaze raked over me again, hungry, spiteful. Then she hissed, "That place doesn't raise daughters. It raises decorations. It raises weapons. You'll get used and thrown away." There it was, the real her. The girl who had died in the snow with her pride still in her mouth. I folded the flyer in half, then in half again, slow and neat. "And this place," I murmured, gesturing vaguely at the city behind her, "raises what? Saints?" Grace's lips pressed tight. For a second, I saw panic flicker behind her eyes. Not fear of me, fear of the life she had chosen, because the Turners did not look rich, but they looked kind, and that kind of kindness always came with invisible chains, the kind that tightened when you tried to breathe, the kind that said, "We saved you, so you owe us." Grace's gaze darted again, like she couldn't stop imagining what my rooms looked like, my meals, my schools, my future. Her voice went soft, almost pleading. "Hannah, we're sisters. We don't have to be enemies." My stomach turned at how easy she said it, how quickly she reached for the word sisters, like it was a key that opened any door, like family was a coupon you could redeem after years of absence. I stepped closer until we were just inside each other's air. "We were sisters," I said. "In a life where you didn't come back with a map." Grace's pupils shrank. She understood. The mask slipped again. "You're not supposed to be here," she breathed. I held her stare. "Neither are you." A gust of winter wind tunneled between the buildings, sharp enough to sting. Grace's cheap t-shirt fluttered against her skin. She shivered, quick and involuntary, and I watched the way her body reacted before her pride could catch up. She wasn't built for hunger, not in any lifetime. Behind her, a woman called her name. "Grace, hurry up. We're late." Grace flinched at the sound like it was a whip. Then she snapped her eyes back to me, anger rising as if rage could warm her. "This isn't over," she said, low and shaking. "Don't think you can just take everything." I didn't correct her again. I didn't say I'd never wanted everything. I only smiled, small and clean, the kind of smile that didn't offer comfort. "You're right," I said. "It's not over." Then I turned and walked away before she could see what the sight of her had lit inside me. Because the second I saw Grace holding those flyers, I understood something terrifyingly simple. Madame Sinclair didn't send me out today to let me breathe. She sent me out to see who was still alive on the board. And now that I'd found Grace, now that I'd confirmed she was here, breathing, plotting, clawing at a different kind of cage, I knew the game had already started. When the driver opened the car door, his face didn't change, but his eyes flicked to the folded flyer in my hand. "You found something, miss." I slid into the back seat, the leather swallowing me in cold luxury. I stared out at Grace one last time, her shoulders squared under a burden she had chosen, her eyes still burning holes in my back. "Yes," I said, voice calm as a locked safe. "I found exactly what I needed." And as the limousine pulled away, I let one thought settle in my chest like a blade finding its sheath. Grace could keep her suffering. I was going to keep my leverage. Hannah, her eyes swept over me. My clothes, my skin that was actually cared for. The air around me that no longer looked like orphanage kid. Jealousy flashed like a hairline crack. So quick that if I hadn't lived 2 lifetimes beside her, I might have missed it. Grace laughed. "You look comfortable," she said, tilting her head like she pitied me. "But don't say I didn't warn you. The Sinclair house isn't somewhere anyone can live in peace. Madame Sinclair, she's way scarier than you think. You'll find out soon enough." I looked at her, calm enough to irritate her. "Is that so?" 2 words. Grace frowned, then switched tactics fast. She started bragging, like she was showing off a new outfit. "The Turners treat me really well. I'm fine every day. Marcus even tutors me," she beamed. "Oh, and we got accepted to Lakeside Prep this year." I paused. Lakeside Prep. The same school Madame Sinclair had just handed me the enrollment notice for. A school for the rich, clean family backgrounds, thick networks. A few kids got in on special admission for talent. Last life, the special admissions were me and Ethan. Grace looked at me, her eyes shining with a warped kind of certainty. "Our lives are only going to get better," she said, like she was nailing it into place. "And you're going to die horribly on the street." Just like last time, she said it lightly, like she was predicting the weather. I parted my lips to answer, but right then, a boy's voice sounded behind her. "Grace, why are you standing out in the sun?" A young man walked up, carrying a lunchbox. Tall, good-looking, bright face, but eyes cold as winter water. Marcus Turner. Grace immediately ran into him like he'd come to rescue her. "You're here." Marcus handed her the lunchbox. "Mum told me to bring this. It's noon. Don't stand here. I'll take your spot for a while." "No, it's fine." Grace shook her head, but her voice stayed sweet. "I can handle it." I watched and almost laughed. The Turners would scrape together money to send Marcus to expensive tutoring, keep their future golden son clean and untouchable, while Grace stood in the sun passing out flyers. Last life, I'd been exploited the same way, Only I never got anyone bringing me lunch because they were too busy telling me I had to learn independence. Marcus finally noticed me. Grace tugged his arm, introducing me like she was being generous. Marcus, this is my sister, Hannah. You met her at the orphanage. Marcus glanced at me. Just one look, but it carried coldness, annoyance, and a hint of contempt, like don't stain my sister's life. He didn't say a word to me, he only turned to Grace, voice dropping into lecture mode. Stop talking to people like her. Let's go. Before I could even open my mouth, Grace let him pull her away. As they left, I caught Marcus's voice, quiet, poisonous, pouring into her ear. You're so naive. You can tell just by looking she's not decent. Get close and she'll stab you in the back. I stood there, not angry, just amused. Same old play, same script, new cast. I turned, took the card Madame Sinclair gave me, and walked straight into a luxury mall nearby. I bought a pile of designer items, bag after bag, and when I came back out, I saw Grace on the other side of the street. Her face went pale. She lifted her chin like she could soothe herself with a curse. So what? She muttered. You're just showing off. You'll still die horribly later. Not like me and my brother. We're going to start a huge company. I laughed because she was naive in the saddest way. She thought the future was something you could speak into existence. She didn't know the future was paid for in blood, and not everyone can afford the price. I got back in the car and returned to the Sinclair estate. The truth was, I hadn't bought a single thing for myself. Everything was a gift for Madame Sinclair, for the butler, for the staff who'd treated me like a young lady, and finally, for Jason. When I walked in, Jason was home for once. He leaned against the stairs, watching me with all my bags, and sneered. Well, well, he dragged the words out. Haven't been a Sinclair for long and you're already addicted to shopping. You think this house belongs to you? Jason, madam, Sinclair snapped, sharp as a whip. She's your sister. Jason rolled his eyes. Sister my arse. He looked me up and down. That country girl is my sister. I'd be embarrassed to be seen with her. I didn't argue. I didn't have time for wounded pride. I opened the bags and started pulling out boxes, laying them out like bricks. Mum, I said, handing the first one to Madame Sinclair, this is for you. A light silk scarf. Subtle, elegant, exactly her style. Then gifts for the butler, for the maid who always brought hot tea to my room, for the gardener who quietly fixed the swing outside. Surprise flickered in their faces, then emotion. In this house, gifts weren't just gifts. They were messages. I remember you, and I understand the rules. Madame Sinclair watched me, and for the first time her eyes softened, just a thread, not affection, approval. Jason still looked annoyed, but his gaze wasn't as sharp as before. I pulled out the last gift. A racing car, model, detailed down to the paint lines. Jason, I said softly, offering it. I heard Mum say you like racing. I saw this and thought of you. Jason froze. Like he didn't expect I'd actually get him something. Like he didn't expect a country girl to hit his pride dead center. He muttered something small, half insult, half not enough reason to insult, then snatched the box. Whatever, but he held it against his chest like it mattered. Not long after, the first day of school came. I was ready to take my own ride, but the moment I stepped outside, a car was already waiting. Jason's car. The window slid down. Jason sat inside, frowning like doing something decent was a punishment. I hurried over, a small, real spark of happiness rising in me. Bro, don't call me that, Jason cut in, voice rough. I told you. I'm not your brother. Then he popped the door open and jerked his chin. You're slow. Get in. My time's expensive. I bark. Nodded obediently and handed him the breakfast the maid had packed. Still warm. Mum said one for each of us. Jason looked awkward for a split second, ears faintly red, but he covered it fast with a blunt line. "Who even eats breakfast?" His mouth said no, his hand still took it. The car rolled forward, the iron gate closed behind us. I watched Chicago's morning slide past like film. My mind was strangely calm. Jason thought it was just a ride to school. Madam Sinclair thought I was the reins. Grace thought I'd die horribly. None of them knew. I was stepping into a new game with every memory from my last life sitting neatly in the palm of my hand. I arched a brow. He was exactly the type. Hard as stone on the outside, soft as butter left in the sun. Before we got out, Jason turned, and Jason's last warning still rang in my ears when I stepped out of the car. His voice had been sharp, impatient, like he was flicking ash off a sleeve. "Don't tell anyone you're my sister. Don't let anyone know we're connected, or I'll make you regret it." He disappeared into the crowd so fast you'd think kindness was a crime scene, and he didn't want fingerprints. The driver tried to smooth it over with a sigh and a practiced line. "Please don't take it personally. The young master has always been like this." I smiled faintly because I understood something the driver didn't. Jason wasn't cruel because he enjoyed it. He was cruel because he was terrified. A boy raised in a house where affection was a leash learns to bite first, just to prove nobody can pull him. I shut the door. The sound clicked clean, decisive, and then I saw them. Right at the lakeside prep entrance, as if the universe had arranged the lighting and the angles for a perfect tableau. Marcus Turner stood there with that effortless calm that makes people mistake silence for depth. Tall, striking, unreadable, a statue built to attract attention without ever asking for it. Girls hovered around him in soft swarms, whispering as if his name was a spell. Beside him was Grace. Her uniform was pressed like she'd ironed her life into place. Hair tied neatly, smile glowing, bright enough to fool anyone who didn't know what it cost to manufacture a smile that pretty. Today she looked exactly like what she'd wanted, a main character. The whispers lapped at them like waves. "Did you hear Marcus is valedictorian for the whole city? Special admission. His sister's good too. Top in the city. Wish I had a brother like that." I didn't slow down. I didn't glance twice. I walked past like their applause was just wind. Because the first rule of surviving a stage is simple. If you look at the spotlight, it blinds you. Placement exams shoved the world into neat little box. I landed in the top AP class. Marcus and Grace were there too, of course. And Jason got dropped into the lowest class like a stone. Not surprising, just funny. The moment I walked into the room, Marcus and Grace followed behind me, and the atmosphere changed like someone had opened a soda can. People turned, smiles widened, eyes lit up. The swarm gathered. Grace wore that sweet, humble pride she'd perfected in the mirror. The expression that said, "I'm modest, but also please worship me." Then she noticed me. She came over like she was doing charity. Voice friendly in a way that felt like being patted on the head. "What a coincidence, Hannah. I didn't think we'd end up in the same class." Her gaze swept down me, fast and greedy, checking if the Sinclair fabric looked real, if the Sinclair polish could be scratched. Then she smiled wider. "Honestly, it makes sense," she said lightly. "With the Sinclair name, getting into Lakeside is a 1-minute problem." She shrugged, a little sigh of pity. "Not like me and Marcus. We had to work ourselves to the bone." The malice flashed and vanished. "Oh, right," she added, still sweet. "Where's that useless Sinclair kid? With Madame Sinclair's personality, she definitely shoved him into this school too, right?" My brows drew together. I was about to answer. "Grace." Marcus stepped in like instinct, placing himself half a step in front of her, protective, territorial, not heroic. Ownership dressed up as concern. His eyes on me were cold, irritated, like I was a stain on the clean story they were selling. "I told you," he said, voice firm. "Stop talking to her." Grace blinked, all innocence. the soft flutter of lashes that made people underestimate how sharp her teeth were. But she hasn't done anything wrong. Marcus's frown deepened. And how do you know she hasn't? I didn't give them the satisfaction of my attention. I pulled out my chair, sat down, opened my management notes, and flipped straight to financial statement analysis. While everyone else measured value in names and grades and social circles, I measured it in lines of cash flow, liabilities, hidden risks. I underlined numbers like I was sharpening a blade. A day passed, then a week. After school, Jason and I met at the gate to ride home together. He clearly hated it. Madam Sinclair was forcing him. He'd scowl, hands shoved in his pockets, jaw tight like the air itself annoyed him. But day after day, he kept tossing me something different. Chocolate milk, sliced fruit, hot fries that smelled like butter and salt, as if he was trying to prove he didn't care by doing the most obvious caring thing he could think of. One afternoon, he held out a small cupcake. He hesitated like he was afraid I'd laugh. "I saw other girls eating these," he muttered, scratching his nose, voice rough. "You don't like it?" I stared for a second, something hot and soft rising in my chest, too unfamiliar to name. Then I took it. "I like it." "Good." He turned his face away so fast it was almost violent, like he was hiding the red creeping up his ears. After that, it became a pattern. Something new every day, like he was buying his own courage one snack at a time. A semester passed, and our relationship shifted in that strange, quiet way. Not openly close, just... He stopped looking at me like I was an intruder, until one afternoon, I ran to the gate as usual, already wondering what Jason would bring today. But there was no car, no driver, no Jason. The air felt wrong, empty in the way a room feels empty when something has been stolen. I searched the courtyard, asked security, asked classmates. No one knew. A cold rope tightened around my heart, pulling, pulling, pulling. Then I heard voices near the parking lot. "Yo, did you hear? Jason Sinclair set up a race behind the hill." "No way." "Yeah, it's probably starting right now." My blood turned to ice. I remembered. Last life, it started like this. A dare, a crowd, a stupid thrill, and then sabotage, a loose bolt. A cut line, terrain behind the hill that looked harmless until it swallowed you. That accident, the crushed spine, the wheelchair. The storm he became. No, not again. I sprinted toward the trail behind the hill, like my life depended on it because, in a way, it did. My uniform shoes tore my heels. The wind slapped my face. Dust filled my mouth. My lungs burned like they were being wrung out. Behind me, someone shouted my name. Another voice yelled for me to stop. I didn't. The hill rose ahead like a dark mouth. And somewhere beyond it, engines were already screaming. By the time I reached the ridge, the race was already in full fever. Bodies packed the dirt, clearing shoulder to shoulder. Phones raised like lanterns at an execution. Someone screamed my name and got swallowed by the noise. Someone else laughed too loudly. Engines roared and snapped, animal-throated, vibrating through my ribs like a second heartbeat. Cars tore down the narrow path, tires chewing rock, dust detonating into the air until the world turned the colour of ash. And then, boom! The blast punched the sky open. For a fraction of a second, everything slowed into a nightmare's clarity. A red sports car fishtailed hard, skidding sideways, its rear end whipping out like it had been yanked by an invisible hand. The driver fought the wheel, but the car didn't obey. It shot toward the corner where the ground fell away into a cliff. "Jason!" My voice ripped out of me, raw and desperate. I ran straight into the smoke and shouting, lungs burning, uniform skirts slapping my legs, gravel spraying beneath my shoes, just a little more. If I could reach the door, if I could yank it open, if I could drag him out. A violent force hooked my shoulder from behind and slammed me down. I hit the ground hard, rolling over gravel. Fire tore through my knees. Before I could push up, a shadow leaned over me, broad, ugly, swaying with liquor breath. "This your brother?" The man sneered, eyes bright with cruelty. "You trying to play hero?" I looked past him toward the driver's seat. Jason was trapped. Thick smoke curled out of the crumpled frame like a living thing. The space around him was so tight he could barely move, barely breathe. His eyes were wide. Shock and pain, and the worst part, the part that made my stomach drop, was his hand. It twitched weakly, reaching, not for pride or rage, but for help. Something inside me detonated. "Call an ambulance!" I screamed. "Call 911! My brother's going to die!" The man spat onto the dirt, hatred flashing like a match. "Your brother crossed me!" He grabbed my collar and hauled me up like I weighed nothing. "And you think you're saving him? Dream on!" I twisted and slapped him across the face with everything I had. The crack echoed. For one delirious beat, I thought the sound might wake the world up. "This is attempted murder!" I shouted, loud enough for every phone camera. "You're committing a crime! I'm not letting this go!" I reached for my pocket. A brutal hand snatched my phone away. It flew, hit a rock, and the screen burst into a spiderweb of glass. "Who the hell does this little bitch think she is, screaming like that?" A slap landed across my face. The world tilted. I tasted blood, metallic and hot. I collapsed, ears ringing, and before I could blink, a shoe came down hard on my cheekbone. Pain shot straight through my skull. My vision swam. Through the blur, I saw someone walking toward me from the edge of the crowd, moving like he belonged in cleaner places. Marcus Turner. Hope, stupid and stubborn, flared in my chest. I forced my head up, dragged air into my lungs, and screamed like it was my last prayer. "Marcus! Help me!" He was close enough now that I could see it. Hesitation flickering across his face. One small crack in his perfect composure. For a second, I truly believed he'd step in, that he'd be a person, not a story. Then Grace rushed to him and grabbed his hand. Her voice shook as she whispered, but the tremble was calculated, timed to sound fragile. "Don't look. Don't get involved. Those guys. You don't want to mess with them." I watched Marcus's eyes change, from uncertainty to surrender. He gave the smallest nod, the kind of nod that erases a conscience. "Okay." He looked at me one last time, long, deep, like he wanted to carve the image into his memory so he could feel guilty later in peace. Then he turned away, pulling Grace with him, dragging safety out of trouble like it was a prize. The man beside me laughed, low and nasty. He popped the trunk of a nearby car and pulled out a heavy hammer. Metal flashed in the sun. "No one's ever dared to hit me," he said, stepping closer, voice thick with venom. "Today, I'm going to teach you what a slap costs." The crowd's cheering blurred into something distant, like animals screaming in an arena while someone else bled for entertainment. I squeezed my eyes shut. This is it, I thought. But instead of pain crashing down, I heard a strangled groan right beside my ear. Heavy, dry, sickening. I snapped my eyes open. Jason, somehow he'd staggered out of the wreck. Smoke smeared him black. Blood streaked his mouth and chin. He stood between me and the hammer like he could still be a shield. One shoulder folded wrong, as if the joint had been split open. Hot blood spilled from his lips and dripped onto my face, onto my hands. For a second, I went completely numb. "Jason! Jason!" I grabbed his shirt, panic shredding my voice. Don't do this to me. Don't scare me." He stared at me, eyes blown red, lips trembling like he wanted to call me an idiot, like he wanted to say something sharp to pretend he wasn't afraid. But no sound came out. Then his knees buckled. He dropped right in front of me. It felt like my heart fell off a cliff with him. I lunged forward and cradled his head, hands shaking so badly I could barely hold him. "Don't sleep, please, wake up. Don't do this, please." Fingers fisted in my hair and yanked me up. "Keep crying and I'll sew your mouth shut," the man growled. "Make you silent for life." Fear should have taken me. It didn't. Worry drowned everything. I clamped onto his wrist, nails digging into skin like I wanted to tear him open. "You're trying to kill us!" I screamed, throat raw. "You're going to prison, I swear!" A horn blared in the distance, long and sharp, like a blade slicing the air. The crowd jerked, turning, and in that instant, clarity hit me like ice water. If I didn't get Jason out today, no matter what it cost, this life would repeat itself. The only difference was, this time, I wouldn't forgive anyone. "I already called the police," I rasped, forcing the lie through burning lungs. "Let us go, or—" I didn't finish. A hand like iron clamps crushed my throat. Air vanished. A horrible, choking sound tore out of me. My feet kicked uselessly. My eyes bulged as I watched. His face twist from rage into something pleased, like my panic was entertainment. "Called the cops," he sneered. "Who are you trying to scare? Even if you did, I'm not afraid." He leaned in, breath reeking of alcohol and cigarettes. "Today, I'm going to show you what happens when you go against me." Then he let go like he was dropping trash. I hit the ground hard, back slamming into gravel. My head rang. Before I could crawl, he strode to Jason and kicked him straight in the ribs. Jason curled in on himself, shaking, breath stuttering, blood still bubbling from his mouth. "No!" I threw myself at the man's leg, clinging like a drowning person grabbing a post. "Don't hit my brother! Stop! Please!" He kicked me aside like I was nothing. "You think you can tell me what to do?" He snorted. "Where's my pride, huh?" He flicked his hand. His crew lit up like dogs being unleashed. They swarmed Jason, fists, boots, knees, everything raining down. His ragged breathing turned into muffled, choking groans. Blood splattered the dirt, dark red against grey dust. I saw a metal bar a few feet away. I lunged, seized it, and swung. "Back off!" One hit. Someone stumbled back, clutching a shoulder. Another. Someone cursed and dodged. I stopped thinking. I just hit. I just carved space. I just needed an opening. They backed up. Not because they were afraid of me, but because they were afraid of the look in my eyes. Something feral, something that didn't care about consequences anymore. The second I forced them back, I dropped the bar and crawled to Jason. "Jason, stay with me, please." My hands shook as I touched his cheek. "I'm getting you out, I swear." He was lighter than I'd imagined, or maybe adrenaline made me stupidly strong. I hooked my arm under him and hauled him up, dragging him step by step. "Just get down the slope. Just reach the road. Just find a car. Just get to a hospital. Just faster." But after only a few yards, a shadow swallowed us. "Where do you think you're going?" They'd lined up ahead like a wall of meat. The leader rolled an iron bat in his hand, eyes full of mockery. "You really thought you were leaving today?" He laughed. "You hit our boss and you think you can walk away? Did you ask us?" A brute stepped forward, muscles like living stone, even with a year of training. Monsters like this didn't fight fair. Jason let out a thin groan, trying to push me away. "Don't worry about me. Run!" I held him tighter. No, for the first time in my life, I disobeyed Jason. "If we're leaving," I said, voice shaking but solid, "we leave together. I'm not leaving you here alone." The leader clapped, the sound hollow in the dusty wind. "Wow, real touching." His eyes narrowed. "Time to end this." A kick slammed into me before I could raise my guard. I went flying. Jason fell too, his head cracking against gravel. They closed in. The circle tightened. Iron scraped stone, clink, clink, like a funeral bell. "Get them!" the leader roared. "Whoever hits hardest, big reward!" They charged. Instinct made me curl over Jason, turning my body into a shield. I squeezed my eyes shut, biting my lip until I tasted blood. "It's okay," I told myself. "Just don't let it be him." And then, bang! A cold, dry crack tore through the air. Everything froze. An iron bat dropped with a metallic clang, rolled twice, and stopped. No blow came down. A voice cut through the dust, hard and absolute. "Don't move! Hands up! Police!" Red and blue lights stuttered through the haze like rain in a drought. Heavy footsteps pounded, radios crackled, officers surged in and formed a protective ring around me and Jason. The thugs who'd been fearless a second ago panicked like rats in fire. They scattered, slipping on rocks, shoving each other, vanishing into the trees. I grabbed an officer's sleeve, trembling, voice shredded into nothing. "Please, take my brother to the hospital, now, please." When the stretcher arrived, the click of straps and metal sounded like hope being fastened into place. I followed until Jason was pushed into the ambulance, until the doors slammed shut. That was when the cord inside me finally snapped. My nerves, stretched tight as wire, went slack. The world went dark. When I woke, it was late afternoon the next day. Antiseptic stung my nose. Soft yellow light pooled on the sheets. A monitor beeped in a steady rhythm that felt like a borrowed heartbeat. And the moment I opened my eyes, Madame Sinclair was sitting by my bed. She was always cold, always straight as a blade. Yet now her eyes were red, shadows bruising the skin beneath them, like she hadn't slept at all. "Hannah." Madame Sinclair's voice was the first thing that reached me, tight, frayed at the edges. The moment my eyes opened, she grabbed my hand as if she was afraid I'd vanish again. "You're awake." My throat felt like sandpaper. Every breath scratched. I swallowed anyway, forcing the words out. "Jason, how is he?" The instant I said his name, her composure cracked. Tears spilled down her cheeks, silent but unstoppable, as if grief had been waiting behind her eyes this whole time and finally got permission to exist. "Jason was just taken into surgery," she whispered, voice shaking. "He still isn't out." I sat up too fast, dizziness swaying the room. Madame Sinclair steadied me without thinking, her grip firm, instinctive. For a woman who lived on control, that reflex was almost shocking. Before either of us could say more, the door swung open. A doctor walked in, mask pulled down, face drawn with exhaustion. But his eyes were lighter, the way someone looks when they've just dragged a life back from the edge. "The patient has been transferred out of the operating room," he said. Madame Sinclair and I stood at the same time, movements mirrored like we were bound by the same invisible wire. The doctor lifted a hand, calming us before panic could take shape. "Don't worry. His legs, we saved them." He exhaled deeply, like he'd been holding that breath for hours. "He was incredibly lucky. If you'd been even a little later, we couldn't have. Right now, he needs rest and rehabilitation." Relief hit me so hard my knees almost buckled. I gripped the bed frame until my knuckles went white. The doctor's tone turned serious again. There was heavy trauma to his lower back from the impact, but fortunately it did not damage his spine. I closed my eyes and let a breath spill out of me like I'd been drowning. In the other timeline, Jason's body had become a prison. His rage had eaten him alive from the inside. If that had happened again, if he'd lost his legs because I hadn't been fast enough, there was no version of me that would ever forgive myself. Jason woke up 2 days later. Madame Sinclair had been sitting like a statue at his bedside for hours. Posture rigid, jaw clenched. The second his eyes fluttered open, she erupted, furious and devastated in the same breath. "You idiot!" she snapped, voice breaking mid-word. "Do you have any idea what you put me through? Do you think your life is a toy? Do you think—" Jason barely reacted. His lashes blinked slowly, his face pale with pain. He didn't even look at her at first. He searched the room, looking for me. When his gaze finally found mine, something in his eyes shifted, softened, steadied like he'd found the one anchor he trusted. His lips moved. Little sis. 2 words, simple, weak, and somehow they fell into the room like a key turning inside a lock. I froze. Madame Sinclair froze too, as if the air itself had gone still. "What did you just call Hannah?" she asked, voice sharp with disbelief, like she didn't trust her own ears. Jason grimaced from pain, but he repeated it. Anyway, clear and stubborn, refusing to retreat. "Little sis!" Madame Sinclair stared at him, then at me. For a moment, her eyes looked strangely unguarded, like she was seeing a truth she hadn't allowed herself to want. Then she lifted a hand and placed it on my shoulder, one small pat. It wasn't a reward, it was recognition. From that moment on, I wasn't the adopted girl meant to keep Jason on a leash. I wasn't a tool she'd bought to tame her son. I was family. "My good girl," Madame Sinclair choked out, pulling me close with one arm while her other hand stroked Jason's hair, fingers trembling like she was afraid he'd break. Her orders came out harsh, repeated like vows carved into bone. "No more racing, stay home, and study properly with Hannah. After high school, I'll send you both abroad." She'd said those words countless times before. Jason had always answered with a scowl, a refusal, a slammed door, but this time, Jason nodded. And then he looked at me, voice weak but dead serious, as if he was signing his name to a new life. "Okay, I'll go with my little sister." Madame Sinclair squeezed my hand. Her palm was warm, real, not forced. In that warmth, I felt something rare from her, honesty. In that moment, I knew it with an ache so sharp it almost hurt. I really had a family. After that, I cooperated with the police. I gave my statement. I described the tampering on the car, the sabotage, the way the accident wasn't an accident at all. The investigation expanded fast. Evidence piled up. The assault was deliberate. The sabotage was deliberate. The whole group was arrested and prosecuted according to the severity. One day, when Jason's strength had returned enough for him to sit up without his face tightening in pain, he took my hand. His gaze was steady in a way that still surprised me, like he'd finally learned where to put his fierceness. "From now on, I'll protect you," he said. "Don't do anything that's stupid again. Don't risk your life like that, okay?" I nodded. Yes. But inside, a quieter truth answered first, even if it happened again, even 100 times. If I had to choose again in that moment, I'd still run straight in. Jason stayed in the hospital for 3 months. I arranged with the school to study from home. I stayed beside him, brought textbooks, practice exams, notes, and turned his recovery room into a battlefield of paper and patience. We fought less, we talked more, and every time Jason solved a hard problem, his eyes lit up like a kid winning a different kind of race. A race where no one had to drive off a cliff just to feel alive. A month after he was cleared to return, Jason and I walked back into Lakeside together, just in time for the first monthly exam. When I stepped out of the exam room, I ran straight into 2 faces I hadn't seen in a long time. Marcus Turner and Grace. Grace froze for half a second, startled, then snapped into performance like she'd flicked a switch. Her eyes widened, her mouth softened. Concern painted itself across her face so beautifully it could have fooled anyone who hadn't lived through her lies. You're back already?" She rushed over, voice sugary. "I heard you got hurt. Was it bad? I thought you dropped out for sure." Beneath the sweetness, I caught it, a thin thread of satisfaction, buried deep, like she'd been disappointed I was still breathing. I didn't answer. I walked past them like they were unnecessary. "Hannah," Marcus called after me. For once he didn't have that usual look of disgust. His voice was quieter, rougher, like guilt had finally woken up late. "Are you okay?" The memory slammed into me, my screams, his hesitation, Grace's hand on his wrist, his nod, his back turning as he walked away. Even to a stranger you shouldn't be that cruel. I felt nothing for him now, not hate, not heartbreak, just a cold, clean emptiness. "I'm fine," I said flatly. I started to leave. Marcus stepped forward and grabbed my wrist. "What are you doing?" I snapped, yanking back. Before I could pull free, a backpack flew in from nowhere and cracked Marcus straight in the forehead. Thud. Marcus stumbled back, stunned, letting go. Jason walked up calmly, bent down, picked up the bag, and looked at Marcus with eyes cold as winter. "You got a problem?" Jason said, voice even but sharp. "You putting your hands on my sister?" Marcus held his forehead, mouth opening. Grace rushed in, grabbed his arm, and tugged him away like she was dragging a dog from a fight. "Forget them. Let's go." Marcus got pulled a few steps, but he kept looking back, again and again, until they disappeared into the hallway crowd. 2 silhouettes and 1 mistake that would never be undone. "Or do you like her now?" Marcus went completely still. He didn't deny it. He didn't laugh it off. He didn't even look offended. He just froze, like the question had pinned him to the wall, and his silence was the only honest thing left in him. And that silence said more than any explanation ever could. Grace saw it too. I watched comprehension flood her face, then curdle into something darker than jealousy. It wasn't just the rankings anymore. It wasn't just pride. It was possession. She nodded slowly, laughing under her breath. The sound scraped through her teeth, low and ugly. "Fine," she whispered. "Just wait." Then she spun on her heel and stormed toward the principal's office like she was marching into war. Not long after, Jason and I were called in. The school did it by the book. They checked test packets, compared handwriting samples, reviewed camera footage from the hallways, audited the online score system, questioned proctors, re-interviewed students who sat nearby. It was a full procedure, the kind that usually took days. This time it took hours. The conclusion came down clean and final. No cheating, not even a shadow of it. And because Grace had filed the accusation loudly, publicly, aggressively, because she'd disrupted school order and attacked the credibility of staff, she didn't just lose the case. She earned consequences, a write-up, a formal warning, a disciplinary mark that would follow her like a stain. Grace exploded in the principal's office. "No!" she screamed, slamming her palm on the desk hard enough to rattle the pen cup. "You can't write me up! They cheated! Are you all blind?" She turned on the administrators next, voice sharp as broken glass. She called them corrupt, called them bought, called them stupid. She yelled until her throat turned hoarse, until even the secretaries outside the door looked tired of breathing the same air. The principal's face went cold. Suspension was recommended, expulsion was mentioned. That was when the Turners arrived in a rush, apologizing, offering gifts, pleading with moist eyes and trembling voices, swearing they would discipline their daughter and correct her behavior. The school relented, reluctantly, and allowed Grace to stay. For now. But the damage was already done. The rumours spread through Lakeside like dry grass catching fire. They didn't even need evidence. Grace had performed her own downfall in public. Grace is obsessed. Grace is jealous. Grace is unstable. Grace loves drama. Even Marcus, the person who had always stepped in front of her like a shield, started avoiding her. He went quieter, and when he looked at her now, it wasn't affection, it was exhaustion. Grace noticed. Of course she noticed. She'd always been good at reading a room, good at sensing when the spotlight slipped off her face, and she spiraled. Her outbursts got louder. Her mood swings got sharper. Marcus got dragged down by the chaos like someone tied stones to his ankles. His grades crashed. The valedictorian myth collapsed. He slipped from the higher track into regular classes. Teachers called home. Warnings came, keep this up, and you'll face discipline. When Grace heard, she stormed into a teacher's face and accused the teacher of secretly liking Marcus and trying to split them up. It was absurd. It was vicious. It crossed a line. During one meltdown, Grace hurt a teacher. Not pushed past by accident. Not bumped in the hallway, hurt. The school couldn't bury it anymore, not with cameras, not with witnesses, not with a teacher crying in the nurse's office. Grace was expelled. When the rumour reached me, my pen paused mid-stroke, not because I felt sorry, because I recognised the pattern. In my last life, Grace died on the roadside in the snow, discarded by the rich like she was trash, reduced to a headline and a cautionary tale. In this life, she wasn't dying yet, but she was still unravelling the same way. A girl who couldn't survive outside a cage always destroys the cage first. At that exact moment, something soft and sweet was set on my desk. 8? Jason asked, trying to sound rough like always. You've been studying too hard. Eat. I looked up. Jason was grinning, rare enough that it felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. Thanks, I said. I took the pastry and ate slowly, letting the sugar settle my nerves. Outside the window, I felt a gaze. I turned my head. Marcus Turner stood in the opposite hallway. Up close, he looked completely different than the golden boy everyone used to praise. The sharpness was gone. The untouchable composure was cracked. Dark circles bruised the skin beneath his eyes. His shoulders slumped like he'd been carrying something too heavy for too long. Misery hollowed him out. I lowered my gaze and turned away. I didn't look at him again. I finished eating, kept studying. When application season approached, under Madam Sinclair's guidance, Jason and I applied to an international university program and registered for entrance. Screening. Madam said if we got in, we wouldn't need the traditional SAT route. We just needed to prepare to leave. Still, Jason and I chose to take the graduation exam like everyone else, not for any grand reason, just because we wanted to experience it one more time, close out our youth properly, with a clean ending and no loose threads. The night the exams ended, the dorms erupted with cheering. Everyone looked like they'd escaped a cage. Jason snuck out, bought an absurd amount of food, came back, split it with his roommates, then vanished like he was allergic to gratitude. I carried a big bag back toward my room, and I saw a figure standing in the shadows at the bottom of the stairs. My heart stuttered. For 1 second, 100 possibilities flashed through my mind until he stepped forward into the light. Marcus, thinner, paler, his eyes no longer sharp, just bitter and stubborn with regret. "How'd you do?" he asked, voice hoarse. I stared at him without moving. Were we close enough for that, after everything, after the way he'd watched me bleeding and chose to walk away? Silence fell. Then Marcus spoke softly, like he was afraid I'd disappear if he said it too loud. "Hannah, you don't recognize me." His voice trembled, and in that instant, I understood. Marcus had woken up too. Maybe he'd come back like us. Maybe the memories had just returned, clinging to him like a nightmare he couldn't shake. He took half a step forward, eyes burning like someone dragged out of hell. "That day, I was going to come back for you," he said fast, terrified I'd cut him off. "But Grace pulled me away. A few days later, I heard you left school and I went crazy worrying." He swallowed hard. "After that, I started dreaming, over and over. I dreamed my family adopted you. I dreamed you were my little sister. I dreamed we studied abroad together. built a life, got married. His voice dropped as if he could hear how insane it sounded. I dreamed you told me. You wanted to be with me forever. Then he snapped his head up, eyes blazing. Hannah, I wasn't dreaming, was I? Those things, they happened. We were… Marcus! I cut him off, my voice cold as steel. What are you talking about? I looked him straight in the face, each word clean and final. I'm Jason Sinclair's sister. I'm a Sinclair. We don't know each other. Marcus went pale. I didn't stop. Don't come looking for me again. I brushed past him and walked up the stairs. Hannah, Marcus called after me, voice cracking. Hannah, wait! I paused for half a beat, but I didn't turn around. I kept going. That night, my roommate told me Marcus stood outside the dorm for a long time, almost all night, like someone abandoned by his own memories. The next morning, I packed. The Sinclair car was already waiting. Jason stood by it, glanced at me, then tossed me a bottle of water like he always did. Voice blunt. Get in, let's go. We left, carrying 3 years of youth, and a piece of memory I'd locked away with my own hands. When results came out, Jason and I were accepted into the international university program Madam Sinclair had arranged. My graduation score ranked first in the entire city. Jason ranked 5th. Madam Sinclair celebrated like it was a festival. She threw a lavish 18th birthday for both of us and declared to the upper class, the Sinclair house has 2 children. In September, we flew out. At O'Hare Airport, in the river of rolling suitcases, I saw Marcus beyond the barrier. His eyes held hope, obsession, regret. I didn't stop. I walked straight into security, into a new life. As the plane lifted, Chicago shrank beneath a blanket of white clouds. I closed my eyes. I knew I was finally stepping into a future that belonged to me, and no one was going to drag me back again.